To talk about Steve Reich's influence, it's such a big influence. He's really reshaped American music, I would say. I mean, I think you can speak about him the way that we talk about Bob Dylan or other, really significant figures whose influence extends far beyond the realm of just kind of contemporary classical music. While he's, America's greatest living composer in that arena as well, his influence is strongly felt all over the kind of musical universe. Steve Reich's music is kind of instantly identifiable, which is part of the strength of it. You know it within 3 notes, you can tell it's him. In the 60s, when he started working, he was a renegade, he was vanguard. His music was shocking to certain circles. Shocking in its rhythmic intensity. At the time, there weren't a lot of musicians who would play it. It's very difficult, very challenging. It requires a certain type of skills. So Steve, along with some of his contemporaries, people like Philip Glass, they formed their own ensembles of musicians, Steve Reich musicians, which is still a group. And these are incredible instrumentalists who really, worked with him for many, many years, and learning, kind of developing with him. Everybody plays the music in conservatories, and even in European capitals. It's now programmed at most major theaters. So he's obviously become a part of the broader spectrum. Steve likes to think, I always say that he is in a way kind of generations ahead. Somehow he says, you ask him about jazz or rock music and he says, that was what was in the air. He grew up in New York City, if you were in New York in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it's what the music that was in the air was popular music. And in his case, these are their porous boundaries. So his influence in popular music, electronic music, there's whole genres, kind of subgenres of popular music that are very much, almost highly derivative, actually, of Steve Reich. You hear it all the time in certain kinds of electronic music. Major, important, someone like Johnny Greenwood from the band Radiohead. Steve Reich is a huge influence on their music, and then Radiohead has gone on to influence generations of young musicians with their work. So I think Steve doesn't. He's not so interested in the kind of drawing lines between, academically trained or someone coming from, Steve is a Juilliard-trained composer, but sometimes you find untrained musicians who are making very, very sophisticated, very complex work. Stargaze is a really interesting orchestral collective from Berlin, actually kind of half from Berlin, half from Amsterdam. There's many musicians from the Netherlands. And a fantastic director, conductor, André de Ridder, who is extremely skilled, has an amazing, kind of professional experience. He's worked with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the New York Philharmonic. He conducts major orchestras all over the world. And he's someone that really loves to collaborate. He loves to initiate projects. The musicians in Stargaze share with him a passion for a kind of DIY, do-it-yourself community. They're building relationships with young composers, with bands, with theatrical work, dancers. And so they're kind of a new model for a large ensemble of musicians who work together, and they'll program. Their programming is very innovative. So they'll do a Ligeti concerto, and they'll do a very experimental John Cage piece. They'll play something of mine, and then they'll do a Bach cantata, and that can all be on the same program. And I believe it's the first time that Stargaze has been presented in France. So it's a very kind of significant milestone for their career. Stargaze have performed quite a lot of Steve Reich's music, and I think that they exist in a universe that Steve Reich helped create, very much a kind of legacy of self-organizing ensembles. In Steve's case, Steve Reich Musicians was driven by a composer. Stargaze is really organized around these amazing group of 20-some musicians with André de Ridder as a director. And I think that you can look at Stargaze as kind of existing in a continuum that unites American music and European music. Coming out of Berlin and the Netherlands, they have a strong footing in the European avant-garde in the tradition of, can you even think of Pierre Boulez and a group like Ensemble Intercontemporain as a kind of model.